I would now like to introduce our first speaker. And this is someone who doesn't just talk about the future, but it is someone who really tries to help people make sense of the future in unpredictable environments. He's really a world citizen, and we had the speaker dinner last night where I learned this again and how many different countries you've actually lived. Born in South Africa, right now you live in the United States, but he's really a citizen of the world. He's also a former investment banker. He worked with BNP Paribas, and he's also a best-selling author. So some of your books like Disruptive with Impact, and you also have a book stand, of course, which I will point out again, where people can find it later. And he also coined the term Techistentialism. Is that how you pronounce it?
100%.
Okay, great. So, with deep insights into what's predictable and what isn't, and how AI is reshaping human relevance, let's please welcome to the stage futurist, author, and strategic provocateur, Roger Spitz. The stage is yours.
Thanks, Harald. And just, I'm seeking redemption. I used to be an investment banker, but I'm seeking redemption, so just to point that out. And as an investment banker and currently futurist, I have a very, very deep interest in philosophy. And one of the big questions I've been wrestling with is agency and choice. Now, in 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche declared that God was dead. And that was not so much a provocation from a religious standpoint, but actually a big question around meaning and what's next for humanity. Many of you may know, but Nietzsche was actually born about 20 kilometers from here and went to Leipzig University, where he did a lot of his work and research. And today we face an intersection of technology and philosophy with interesting questions, as AI is basically a fundamental, pervasive element to our work, to our lives, and importantly, to our decisions. So much so that Pope Leo, last week, I think, following on from the important work that the Vatican is actually doing on AI, considered that AI was one of the biggest challenges for humanity. So we look at this lens of the future of AI, decision-making, and agency through that intersection of technology and existentialism. Now, in the 19th and 20th century, existential philosophers spent a lot of time on these questions around freedom, agency, and choice. And when you had Jean-Paul Sartre or Simone de Beauvoir sitting in Les Deux Magots in Paris, it was a world where humanity basically had pretty much exclusivity on human decisions. And existing in the world was simply being human in the world. Now, in the 21st century, you're sharing this decision-making with algorithms. And maybe the sharing is equally distributed or not, which we'll have a think about. And so existence in the world today is existence in a technological world. And our existentialist condition is one of deep uncertainty, with the beauty and the dualities of tensions and contradictions and paradoxes. And our tech-essential world is no different. So we're going to unpack that. The real question in tech-essentialism for me, what we call tech-essentialism, which is thinking about humanity, decision-making, and existence in an existential technological world, really boils down to what control you have on technology. This is not a new topic. Heidegger and others have spent time on that important topic. But it's really to do also with what is predetermined, what is predictable, or what is unpredictable, actually. And Jean-Paul Sartre, who's one of the well-known philosophers, famously said, existence precedes the essence. L'existence précède l'essence. And by that, he simply meant that you exist, you create your beingness, and you can do that thanks to uncertainty. And so although it wasn't maybe an era of AI, fundamentally it does boil down to that question as to what is predictable, or not? And what does it mean for AI, and what does it mean for foresight, or for anything you might use AI for in contemplating and exploring the future? I actually like to think about AI or decision-making as a value chain. Quite simple. You gain intelligence, you collect that intelligence, that's descriptive. You use that with a view of interpreting what it might mean, and in a predictive capacity, with a view of informing a possible view on the future. And then prescriptive. How does it drive to actual decisions being made? And today, I would say that humans dominate on the prescriptive side. And in that value chain, we live every day with a partner which is very good at optimization, augmentation, and creativity. And I think that we'll try and unpack why AI is good at that. But primarily it's because it's a predictable environment. So radiology, contracts, even choreographies, even creativity, drug discovery, it's extraordinary what AI can do. And that, for me, is the area where more data, more analysis is helpful. And it can include creativity, because not all creativity is completely novel in the sense of invention versus incremental innovation. We're going to talk about the one on the right, which I think is interesting, which is complex systems. What do we mean by complex systems? And why is it important to make a distinction as to where AI may or may not necessarily be that good at? And complex systems today is really an exception where humans tend to inform the decision-making. It's really that prescriptive bit. And here, we're going to unpack that. We're going to spend a bit of time understanding how AI is moving in the value chain and where humans should also be. So this is a simple dichotomy. For those who work in foresight, who enjoy appreciating the different degrees of uncertainty and unpredictability, for those who enjoy frameworks like the Kinnavan framework, Dave Snowden, and that kind of work, you may be familiar with elements of this. But actually, it's quite simple in ways. It's a distinction between what is complicated versus what is complex. And we'll see why it's actually important and why bother, because who cares, right? Complicated is really, you have an understanding of cause and effect, ex ante. If you do something, it's linear, it's predictable, you know what the impact of that choice is going to be. You have known unknowns, it's a linear, predictable environment. And here, there's a range of right answers. You may not know the answer, but answers are known. You just need to go to the right place. Playbooks work, expertise works, experience is helpful. You sense the situation, you analyze it, and you respond in a way. You can spend your money on consultants and on whatever you need. This is how do you fix a plane. This is how do you send a probe to Mars. I can't do it, but it's well understood by science today. Now, complex, and AI thrives there because it's predictable, because you can analyze things in huge volumes, because you can do the wonders. It's drug discovery. Why has drug discovery platforms doing so well and accelerating some of the medical advancements, right? Now, complex is slightly different, but with important distinctions. It's nonlinear and it's kind of exponential. So small changes can result in big outcomes. Doesn't mean good or bad. It doesn't necessarily have any particular value attributed to it. It's just need to be aware of the system having those features. So you only know ex post, if you do something, what the impact is, okay? And here there's no right answers at that point in time. It's unknown unknowns. It's emergent. Now, this distinction is really, take the Amazon. In Brazil and other countries, but Brazil, a lot of the Amazon is in Brazil, and you want to build a road or move the way things are flowing or build a hotel or whatever, you won't know what the impact of that is because there's so many drivers that are dynamic, that are interacting with each other, that are basically creating something else, that if you were to move one feature, you wouldn't know what's happening to it. Now, the reason this is important to appreciate this distinction is because complex is deeply unpredictable. And the thing about the future, many of you will know, is that there's no data on the future. And so however good your AI is, and I'm sorry for those who might tell you otherwise, and for those who believe that futurists can actually predict or see the future, if anybody can, you should run 1,000,000 miles, because when it's complex and deeply unpredictable, that's exactly what it means. And AI can't do any better. Please. There will be time for questions, but
well, would you like to allow?
We can have it. We have 10 minutes for questions in a few minutes, but feel free to.
If we are aware that, hang on. Yeah.
No, it's great. Don't worry.
If we are aware that humans are not really good at non-linear things, at logarithmic things, at exponential things, and the mathematic abilities of computers are and can do scenarios, why would they not be as good as us in especially this realm?
No, it's a good question, and you put your finger on it. It's not necessary that they won't be good at it. It's that they won't be better at it or helpful in resolving the unpredictable or in predicting the unpredictable. So the danger is the following, and thanks for, what was your name? Ola. Thanks for raising it, because this is really the key through that question, which is maybe computers, it doesn't hurt to run it. These are not either or. Like a lot of questions in the world, it's not either or. The danger is, as humans, what we're doing is we're delegating decision outcomes to machines more and more. So what are we doing? We're descaling, because the world is becoming more complex. We're being less critical, less capable of interpreting things. And so it's not so much as we're able to leverage on AI, it's that we're forced to delegate decision-making to AI because we're losing our own abilities and capabilities. So it's kind of like Ricardo for economics, right? AI is learning fast, and in the meantime, humans are not necessarily developing that capability. So the danger is that you're delegating decision outcomes to machines that are deeply unpredictable. You're wanting them to help you resolve things that they can't necessarily help with. You are becoming less capable of doing that. So let's take LLMs, for instance. Today, LLMs, people are quite happy with them, and that's fine. And they're great for complicated. Just like drug discovery, AI platforms are phenomenal. Now, the challenge is that when you conflate the outcomes with the journey and the discovery process, because in complex, you need trial and error, you need discovery, you need divergent views which test things, you need certain reflexes which maybe humans aren't actually bad at today. And when you're using the immediate LLM to get to the outcome, you're losing sight of that iterative journey, that creative process, those things which might get you to stumble upon something new. And when you're assuming that because AI is good at running predictable things for unpredictable, you're delegating it, you're just looking at the outcomes. The outcomes cannot be better than what might, they cannot do a better job at predicting the future that no one can predict. And meanwhile, you're not going through that creative, iterative process and that journey. And I think that's the interesting thing we need to think about. So let's take some other concrete example. Let's take the interest rates over the past few years, right? None of the central banks were able to get a sense of the interest rates. I think Yellen even said, we thought we had a sense, but they were landing where they were. We thought we could control interest rates, but we didn't have a clue. Not in the exact language, but not far from it. And the problem with that is that they relied entirely on the computers to the exclusion of everything else. They didn't ask a simple question, which actually doesn't require a post-PhD research in AI, which is simply, what if? What if things were systemic and complex and not predictable? What if a number of geopolitical, climate, human, social, and other events, geoeconomics, contributed to interest rates? And what if the models, basically, you needed to think beyond the numbers? They didn't. No central bank thought, well, we can't rely exclusively on what the computer tells us. There's nothing wrong with running the numbers on the computer. The challenge is for humans not to ask themselves a pretty simple question, which is what if? And so this is fundamental, I think, to how we think about AI and the future of AI. Because if the features enable predictability, you're good to go. It's our complicated box. It's wonderful if you want to be able to predict. You know the parameters, you have a specific question which has an answer, and then you can predict a right answer or probabilize it. Now, when you have multiple unknowns, when you have the features of what we call complexity, when there's a broad set of possibilities, when there's no right answer, when they're dynamic and constantly changing, and it's a nonlinear environment, that's where you have a problem. If you're relying on predictability to the exclusion of everything else. That much more so if you're delegating human capabilities for that. And so it's a distinction between risk, uncertainty, and deep uncertainty. Risk, you know the variables and you can put a probability to it. If you smoke X cigarettes or drive at a certain speed, what's the risk of a particular disease or road accident, okay? Uncertainty, you have a sense of the variables, you're not too sure about the probability, but you know the possible futures, okay? Will China become #1 economy? Will you reach space or, at a particular date? Will someone win a particular election or party? Deep uncertainty, or what Mervyn King, former governor of the Bank of England, called radical uncertainty, is when you don't know the various possibilities of the future. You don't know their probabilities. You can't agree on the mitigants for the things that you might be able to list. You can't put a hierarchy of prioritization, and you don't know how they might interact. And this is the environment we're in. It means, what will the specific impact of climate be for New York and LA? Will they be underwater? By what date? Will you work and live in space? Will there be longevity? Will there be immortality? Will there be longevity to 100 years or 140 years? What will be the impact of the different geopolitical powers, US and China, constantly testing each other? To what degree will they test each other? Once you add all that, and singularity, and other considerations, you have a list of possible futures which is very large, which you can't probabilize, which you can't agree on, which you're not agreeing on how you mitigate them, and you can't put a hierarchy to them, and they interact in an unpredictable way, you're in deep uncertainty. And that's where your model, if you're relying on it, if you're using it, but if you're not what-ifing, and you're relying on it, and you're not yourself as humans developing the capability for critical thinking, that's where we might have a challenge. So one of the things we like to think about is, what are the degrees of uncertainty? Because it's fine to say uncertain or deeply uncertain. What do we mean by that? And here, I'm originally from South Africa, and in South Africa, we have the big five. Maybe you know, it's the biggest, strongest animals you fear, okay? It's the elephant, the buffalo, the rhino, leopard, and the fourth one I forget. But in our unpredictable world, we have 5 animals which are degrees of unknowability, which we need to appreciate, and which are not necessarily the biggest and the strongest that are the most dangerous. The first one is known. It's from Michel Walker, the gray rhino. It's things you know for sure. The sun rises and falls in the evening. It's COVID when it's too late. It's charging at you, that rhino. And that certainty, you better make sure you make decisions fast, and ideally you don't reach a stage where the rhino is charging at you. There's a stage before, which is the black elephant, which is known unknowns. And black elephant, it's the elephant in the room. And for AI, the elephant in the room, maybe the gray rhino for AI is social media and disinformation. We know it's there, it's affecting how we think, how we vote, democracies, our welfare, a lot of things. What are we doing about it? Maybe the black elephant is rethinking education. Narrow artificial intelligence is very good at certain things. What are we doing to upgrade our capabilities for that environment? What is that black elephant we're ignoring? For black elephants, you need to recognize it, align, discuss it, do something about it, because it will turn into a gray rhino. When you think about black jellyfish, the sea temperature was rising because of global warming. And that acidity and warmer temperature created a lot of jellyfish. And these jellyfish, basically, we understood what was happening. There were a lot of jellyfish in the sea. What we didn't understand is that nuclear plants and reactors were starting to get clogged up, and there was a second and third order implications. So here you need to ask yourself, what happens next? What else might be happening? Take biotechnology and AI. I was in DC last week, and we were discussing some of the recent findings. When humans are becoming less human and machine-like, when machines are becoming more human-like, when biotechnology is fusing humans and that, how is that relationship evolving? So these are the things you want to think about. The black swans and butterfly effects. You need to build resiliency and think about what are those things and systems that need to allow for, is it a complete breakdown? Is it artificial superintelligence? What does that look like? So when you're thinking about AI and unpredictability, the question is whether the scenarios and the box that just gives you the things to expect are necessarily looking at these dimensions. And so we want to wrap this little introduction here with the following, which is, I think humanity is at crossroads. And if you take the three horizons, in this case, it's Curry and Hodgson's three horizons, which we use. Today is the present, okay? We know some elements that are happening. We're seeing the signals. The transition of the middle box is one where narrow AI is becoming very, very good at certain things, and where it's augmenting and predicting certain things. And that's okay for certain environments, such as the complicated ones. Now, humanity has a choice as to how we basically adapt to that. And the question is, do we allow prescriptive AI, which is autonomously taken decisions and may be imposed, either because we no longer understand the complexity of things and have to rely on computers, or because we think computers are better at it and we conflate the areas where AI might be good? And that future of an A suite, algorithm suite, versus a C suite is what we need to be very thoughtful about. Do we want to be evicted from the decision-making value chain by the systems or AI choosing our role in it, or as humanity, are we upping the game to develop the capabilities to be more thoughtful, more critical thinking, less reliant on automation, understanding better where AI is good and capable, and where humans maybe need to continue and also upgrade their capabilities. And so this is really where I want to leave you with as a kind of concluding comments, is that I personally believe that AI is, like many things, extraordinarily wonderful, but also the duality of some other considerations which are more existential. I think the false dichotomies of utopia, dystopia are asking the wrong questions, which is not do we trust AI and where is AI going, but do we trust ourselves to appreciate and to develop the right relationship with AI? Do we trust ourselves to upgrade our own capabilities in relation to AI? Knowing that AI itself is unpredictable. Everything we think we know about AI today is going to change tomorrow. And so the final comment I would make is that we need to exercise our own agency, decision-making, and choice in relation to AI. And the thing about agency is that agency is like an option. If you don't exercise it, its value is nothing. Okay, of course, yes.
All right. Okay, wow. What a start to kick us off with. Very philosophical, but also extremely thought-provoking for myself, I have to say, in terms of my own practice as a futurist. But I would like to open up the floor to the audience now to ask your questions, to share your thoughts with us. So who would like to go first? Don't be shy. All right. Just briefly say your name and then go on ahead.
First of all, thank you for your great speech. Very impressive. My name is Thomas Pelkofer. I'm living nearby France, in Germany. I'm working in Germany. And I'm now working in an environment where we have scientists in chemistry, and I'm trying to bring in AI.
And what I can see is the big chemistry companies use AI a lot, but they do exactly what you said. They use AI where they can help development in a quicker way, but they still do their tests and try to bring them into the right shape because they don't know the unknown. So I fully agree with that, and it's very complex what they do. Now, you referred to more complex thing like, can we shape the future or can we know the future? And I understood you in that way, that it's a question of it's too many dimensions, it's too complex, there are too many variables. Is that what you said? Is that what we should think about it? Or is it just because the capacities of the future computers are not great enough to get all these informations together? Because where I follow you completely is, we as humans, we lose the ability to do all these thinkings and to get all this information into our head. So we need these systems to get a summarized information to then start making decisions. Now, to come to my question is, do you really believe that there will never be any computer in the world that can answer, for example, the answer 42, which was the answer of the meaning of life? And that's my question to you.
No, thanks for that. So a few quick thoughts. First of all, healthcare is a great example, I think, of, for people who are aware, DeepMind and others. It's extraordinary what healthcare can do. And when you look at, the bringing from 4 years to less than 1 year the drug discovery process, I mean, that's nothing short of miraculous. And one of the reasons they can do that is because we have some understanding of how the body works. So actually, although it seems complex, it's complicated in that box. And funnily enough, Dassault Systèmes, I think, acquired its largest acquisition ever. I think it was an $8 billion NASDAQ company, which was doing the testing of drugs on the humans after you do the discovery. And that is a bit more tricky in terms of complicated versus complex and how the molecules and all that work as to how the body responds to it. And that's where it's kind of like, will you ever be able to shorten that? Now, then to the question about computational capability, no, I don't personally think it's a limitation to computational capability. I think it's really just a question of what's predictable and what isn't, and there's no date on the future. For me, it's, maybe I oversimplify it, I don't know, but every time I've talked about these things, including to some of the most extraordinary statisticians and econometricians, I think a lot of people agree that there's a point where the models simply aren't helpful and you need something else. And I'm sure that the Fed had the best statisticians, econometricians, and supercomputers in the world, or amongst the best. But the challenge was the shortfall of imagination. The challenge was they didn't ask themselves, what if? They didn't think, what do you need if this interest rate number is wrong? And I think it's to do with resiliency for black swans, for things you can't know. What is more resilient than not? Being anticipatory in the sense of second, third order implications, being modest and humble with what you can know and can't know. And I think the key thing is really we're constantly looking for answers. And I love the analogy. I'm a huge fan of 42. But the thing is, the challenge is the lack of imagination and what are the questions we should be asking ourselves, and being able to live with the fact that maybe actually we don't know what will happen tomorrow. Maybe there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe in Zen Buddhism, the idea of mujo and transience and things changing all the time, and you never put your foot in the water twice because the water moves and because your foot evolves and the body evolves. Maybe it's okay to not know. And maybe as humans, we're very well able to adjust to change, but we're in a sort of Newtonian mechanical, with governance, incentive structures, and educational systems, which then flesh out any variance from what is predicted. And I think the challenge is for us to maybe bring back the humility of what is knowable and unknowable, and to have systems that are okay with that, as opposed to making sure we get to the right number 42.
Great point.
I'll let you orient.
Thank you so much. So if I understand correctly, you say that one should rather employ a margin of safety in planning, because some topics are intrinsically unpredictable. Do you have a concrete playbook of how you implement a margin of safety, since we are here in the implementation area, right?
Sure. So I do have a playbook. I have a book which you buy, and if you buy it, all your dreams will come true, including the margin of safety. But I think they're two different things. I think when you think about, and again, listen, I'm not saying this is the right answer. I'm just answering because I'm asked a question. I would send back to you all to think about what I say, to challenge it, and to ask yourself the questions, right? But as I'm asked, I'll give my personal view. I think they're two different things. One is margin of safety, which to me sounds very much like prediction with a range of accuracy. And I think for that, you're still in a predict-act mode and mindset. And you want that margin of safety. And there's nothing wrong with that. One needs to do that. And I think resiliency, if you think about people like Nicholas Nassim Taleb and anti-fragility, it's really, more than margin of safety. It's slack and buffer is actually good. Efficiency is bad in an unpredictable, nonlinear world. So I think that's one answer I would give, which is you are still structured in terms of mindset in a predict and act mode when you're asking a question like that, to my mind. And there's nothing wrong with that. And buffer, slack, inefficiency is good in a nonlinear world. Efficiency is bad. The second thing I would say personally is the implementation for me is what I do talk about in the book. I was kind of half joking, but all your dreams will come true if you buy it. But it's really what we call a AAA model, is that you need three things, basically. You need to accept that it's unpredictable, because it is. Like it or not, it just is. So you need to basically have an anti-fragile foundation, to your point, to resist shocks, black swans, butterfly effects. You want to be resilient plus, because simply you don't know. And it's good not to know. The second thing is you need to be anticipatory. You need to be thinking of the black jellyfish. You need to be thinking about the next order implications. What might you be missing? What if? But you need the agility to reconcile that with decision-making today, whether it's the OODA loop or Kinnovan frameworks or some feedback loop system which is emergent because data is always changing. So at some point, only the present exists. It's a discovery emergent process. You amplify what works, you dampen what might not, and that is basically the agility to reconcile your longer-term vision with the present. So the framework for us is really that. Anticipatory, agility, anti-fragile foundations, and then you need some form of agency, because unless you do something about it, it doesn't exist.
Fantastic. We have time for one more question.
All right.
Hi, I'm Edward. I'm a CEO of a software company, and we make software for logistics systems. And I would say many ordinary workers work with our systems, and we see that we can scale our own work beyond comprehension. Yes, and will this lead to even more division in society?
Hopefully not your work. I mean, it's a big question, right? The lack of alignment, the polarization, and I don't know exactly how to relate it exactly to your question, whether it will lead to A or B, but what I would say personally, and the idea wasn't to try and be philosophical about it, but I do believe at some point you need to go back to the roots and ask it what it is to be human and what it is to coexist with machines. And I do also believe, for those who enjoy in foresight, maybe some of you are familiar with the work of people like Donald Adam Meadows and systems thinking. If you think about how do you drive change through complex systems, worldviews and education is the foundation, okay? So to my mind, when you're thinking about whichever quadrant you're on, whether you're putting those systems as a sort of black jellyfish, second, third order implications, or black swans if systems go funny, or the elephant in the room, at the end of the day, we need to probably upgrade and rethink our educational systems and how we think, how we learn, and to move away from a kind of knowledge-based educational system which doesn't work. And when I say education, it goes from the playground to the boardroom, really, in my mind. And so the question is somehow not always, in my humble opinion, what are the systems we're doing? I mean, of course, we need to think about the safeguards and ethics and that, but I think the big question for me is not just do we trust the systems and what might they do, but do we trust ourselves to understand our relationship with the machines and to develop what it is to remain relevant as humanity in relation to machines? And that goes through education. At the level of an organization, it means how do you work with people, how do you train them, how do you build critical thinking, how, a million things. But effectively, it's that agency around that relationship and that capability of critical thinking, creativity, and the things we know. The more you're pushing people just towards systems without thinking about that, especially if you're using them for the wrong box on complex when it's not helpful, I think that's a double danger, because you're delegating decision outcomes to a machine for decisions which it can't necessarily do better at. Yourself, you're becoming less able and fluent in that decision-making capability. But I don't know if that vaguely answers it, but
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Roger. I really love that you also gave everyone some hands-on advice for how we could possibly prepare for these, for knowing what is unknowable. And for that, I'm very grateful to you that you gave that insight.